This is the story of how myself and Coolio's producer did one of the biggest selling singles in European history, and we didn't even know about it for 16 years. The song that we did is actually a slow remix of a song by a group called Take That. Myself, I'm a producer, engineer in Hollywood who's worked with a lot of huge groups. I'm credited with Bone Thugs-n-Harmony, Lena Santiago, Tracy Spencer, Rodney O and Joe Cooley. Tons of big albums. I did music for NASCAR and Fox. The song that we did is actually a slow remix of a song by a group called Take That. When we were hired to do it, it was supposed to be a remix that was only going to be on the U.S. release of the Nobody Else album. There were 3 albums that were released. Take That, Nobody Else U.S., and our slow hip-hop remix of Sure is the first cut on it. But we didn't know about it until 16 years later that the remix that we did, we were told it was only going to be used on the U.S. release of the album, was also the first cut on the Nobody Else UK album, and also was the 4th or 5th cut on the Greatest Hits album, and it sold millions and millions in Europe, and we didn't even know about it until 16 years later. Here's the story of how it went down. I had worked at a big studio in 1993 called Echo Sound outside of Hollywood, and one of the artists I worked with there was Coolio, and the producer that I worked with Coolio was named Bryan Wino Dobbs, DJ Wino Dobbs. I'm in touch with him on Facebook, and he's aware of all this right now. A year or 2 or more later, I was working directly for record labels, and one of the studios that I was a customer at was called Two Guys from the Valley Studio, which was only owned by one guy, a guy named Baraka. It was the big green building over on, I think it was Cahuenga and Magnolia, just a couple doors up from the 7-Eleven. And he called me up and said that Bryan Wino Dobbs, who I had worked with at Echo Sound with Coolio, needed someone who was really good with the BRC and the ADAT digital tape machines, because this really huge group in Europe had sent him a slowed down stereo a cappella, which is a stereo mix of the vocals only, and they had contracted Bryan Wino Dobbs to create new music under it, and they hired him to do like a hip-hop street remix. And the reason they hired him was Dobbs was, at the moment, I know he's still big in music and doing music now. I see him on my Facebook every day. Bryan was really huge at that moment. He had worked with a lot of big groups. So I remember that Baraka, the owner of Two Guys from the Valley, hired me to do this remix, and I still remember when Bryan walked into the studio, Two Guys from the Valley, he looked at me and he said, "I know you, you're Bill from Echo Sound," because Coolio and Wino thought I looked like Bill Murray, so they called me Bill. So here's the story of how the recording session actually went down, and then I want to tell you a couple little funny stories that happened during the session. We didn't get credited for our work. We did this single. This is the Nobody Else album, US. I went and bought it the day that it came out, and I actually sound scanned it in the late 90s. I think the group had just broken up, and it was just short of gold. So I took this CD that I bought the day that it came out, the Nobody Else US, and I threw it in my drawer with all of my records that I've ever done and my birth certificate and my Air Force discharge papers. So 16 years later, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I want to go on to the web. I want to hear the fast single, because I was told by Wino, who apparently was told that our remix was only going to be on the US, not on the UK and the Greatest Hits album. I believe it made it on there on the last minute. But anyway, whoever made the cover to those 2 albums didn't know we did it. I'm not accusing anyone of wrongdoing or anyone of stealing credit. Brothers in Rhythm were credited with producing the song, and Paul Wright was credited with mixing. My manager a couple years ago got in touch with Paul's manager, and he was really nice. He sent me a nice email through his manager, you know, wishing me the best of luck and saying he was an engineer, blah, 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 and directing me to the producers, the Brothers in Rhythm, and we got in touch with the Brothers in Rhythm. And all I wanted was credit for my work, and I wanted approval for my plaques. It's won many, the albums that our single is on has won many Billboard awards. And all I wanted was somebody to pick up the phone and say, yeah, Dave did this mix, and give them approval for the plaques. I even offered to pay for them. The last responses that I got from the Brothers in Rhythm manager was paraphrased. This is paraphrased, but it might be the exact words that she emailed me. I kept all the emails. I don't understand what this has to do with the Brothers in Rhythm. Don't you think you should contact the record label in the U.S.? So I kind of left it at that. You know, a couple of years ago I went on YouTube and I was looking to see, you know, hey, what's the faster single, the original? I want to hear it. So I go on YouTube, I search Take That Shore, I hit play, there's this long skit. And at the comments on the bottom of this video, I'll post links to the remix of Shore that we did. That's on all three of those albums, so you can click on it and see which one I'm talking about. I went on YouTube and I watched this really long skit intro, and then all of a sudden they played our mix and I was totally shocked. My first reaction was, I can't believe they made this long elaborate video for our remix. So I went to Amazon.com, I think it was, and they let you look at the album and play a little clip of each song. I took this out of my drawer that it had been in for 16 years. I knew that was my mix. I remember every detail about that session, and I'm going to share a bunch of the details in a minute. But I pulled this out and I ripped an MP3 of my mix off of this Nobody Else US release, the first cut on here, and I took a picture of the cover and I sent it to the Brothers in Rhythm manager, and she just responded, I don't understand what this has to do with the Brothers in Rhythm. Shouldn't you take this up with the record label Arista in the US, which I haven't gotten a chance to do yet. And I'm not trying to say that the Brothers in Rhythm or Paul Wright didn't contribute to the production or the mixing. Someone produced the vocals and recorded and mixed the vocals and sent them to us. So I'm not saying that they were credited as producer and mixing. They actually contributed to it. But I mixed the music and I did the final mix that you hear. And I am reaching out to Gary Barlow, Howard Donald, Jason Orange, and Mark Owen. Check with the people who are in charge of this record, the people who maybe call Arista Records in the U.S., and I'm sure there's records of payments for the remix to a Bryan Wino Dobbs. I just want credit for my work, that's all I want. So the way that the session went down, a quick overview of how the session went down, and then a couple of funny stories. What I did was I dumped the stereo vocals onto a digital ADAT machine, and then I locked up some other ADATs to Bryan Wino's drum machines and keyboards, and I dumped all the music onto the ADATs. And then I offset the ADATs so that the stereo vocals that were sent to us from England would be in sync with the music that Bryan Wino made. And then we played a piano intro to the song. I remember Bryan brought this keyboard player with him, and he was sitting on the sofa and he put this electric piano